47 minutes after my son disappeared, the man I'd been hiding him from brought him back. He knelt down, looked into James's face, and said 4 words that stopped my heart. He has my eyes. I'd spent 8 years making sure William Weathers would never know he had a child. But my son's face, those storm gray eyes, that familiar jaw, had just told the truth I'd buried. And standing in that school parking lot, surrounded by police and cameras and parents who had no idea what they were witnessing, I had exactly 3 seconds to decide. Lie and lose him forever, or tell the truth and risk everything I'd built to protect us both. The first scream came from a teacher. The second came from me. James is missing. 3 words. That's all it took to turn a Tuesday afternoon into the kind of nightmare every mother rehearses in the dark, but prays she'll never live. The school parking lot exploded into chaos. Teachers were shouting names into walkie-talkies. Children spilled off buses in clumps, some crying, some confused, all of them scared because they could feel it. That electric panic adults give off when control slips. Parents clutched cell phones like rosaries. A woman near me was sobbing so hard she had to lean against a minivan. I just stood there, frozen. My lungs refused to work. My hands shook so violently I had to grip the edge of the open bus door just to stay upright, my nails scraping yellow paint. My son was gone, not late picking up his backpack, not dawdling near the museum gift shop. Gone. And the cruelest part? The day had started so perfectly normal. James had complained about waking up early. His hair stuck up on one side the way it always did, stubborn as he was. I'd kissed his forehead while he grumbled about the science museum being boring and how field trips were just school but worse because you have to walk more. I adjusted his Spider-Man backpack, told him to stay with his group, told him I loved him. I never imagined those might be the last words I'd say to him. But here I was, surrounded by flashing lights and frantic voices, and a police officer asking me questions I could barely hear over the roar of blood in my ears. "Ma'am, what was he wearing?" I blinked. My mouth moved. "Blue hoodie, gray sneakers, the ones with the Velcro straps because he still can't tie laces properly." My voice sounded far away, like it belonged to someone else. "Does he have a phone?" "He's 8. Any medical conditions we should know about?" "No, he's healthy. He's fine." Except he wasn't fine. He was missing, and I had lost him. The officer's radio crackled. Someone was saying something about checking nearby intersections. My stomach turned over. Intersections. That meant streets, cars, strangers. I thought I might throw up right there on the asphalt. Another mother touched my arm. I didn't know her name. Her eyes were wet. "They'll find him," she whispered. "They always do." But her voice cracked on the word always, and I knew she didn't believe it any more than I did. Because the truth nobody says out loud in moments like this, is that sometimes they don't find them. Sometimes a child walks away and the world swallows them whole, and all you're left with is a face on a poster and a hole in your chest that never closes. I had spent 8 years building a life around James. Every decision, every sacrifice, every lie I told myself about being enough for him, about us being fine on our own, about not needing anyone else. And now he was gone. And all those years meant nothing because I hadn't been watching closely enough. I should have volunteered to chaperone. I should have driven him myself. I should have kept him home. The spiral was ugly and sharp and unforgiving. Minutes stretched into something unrecognizable. Time didn't feel real anymore. My mind kept replaying every terrible story I'd ever heard. The ones you see on the news and think that would never be me. Except now it was me. And James was out there somewhere, alone, scared, too trusting. That was the part that terrified me most. James was kind, open, the type of kid who asked strangers about their dogs and believed people when they said they needed help. I had tried so hard to teach him to be cautious without stealing his sweetness. But what if I hadn't done enough? What if some stranger with a kind smile and a practiced lie had... I couldn't finish the thought. My knees buckled. I caught myself against the bus, gasping for air that wouldn't come. And if you've ever felt that specific kind of terror The kind that makes the world go silent while everything around you screams. Then you understand why I need you to stay with me through this story. Because what happened next changed everything I thought I knew about second chances. Hit that subscribe button. You're going to want to see how this ends. That's when I heard it. A shift in the noise. Gasps, whispers, the sudden hush that falls over a crowd when something extraordinary happens. I looked up. The sea of people parted. And there, walking toward us through the chaos like something out of a dream I didn't know I was having, was a man. Tall, steady, wearing a charcoal suit that probably cost more than my rent, and holding a small, familiar hand. James. My legs gave out. I don't remember running. I don't remember pushing past the other parents, or the police officer, or the teacher who tried to say something. I only remember collapsing onto my knees in front of my son and pulling him into my arms so tightly I was afraid I'd hurt him, but I couldn't let go, couldn't breathe, couldn't do anything but hold him and count his heartbeats against my chest. "Mommy," he sobbed into my neck. "I didn't mean to get lost. I'm sorry, I'm so sorry." "Shh, baby, no, you're okay. You're here, you're safe." I kissed his hair, his forehead, his tear-streaked cheeks. I ran my hands over his shoulders, his arms, checking for injuries I was terrified I'd find. He was whole. He was real. He was here. For a few seconds, that was all that mattered. And then I looked up. The man who had brought my son back stood a few feet away, giving us space but not leaving. His hands were in his pockets. His expression was calm, patient, protective. And that's when the world tilted sideways. Because the man standing in front of me, the man who had just returned my child, who had stayed with him, who had kept him safe, looked exactly like the ghost I had spent 8 years running from. William Weathers, my ex, the billionaire CEO whose face I'd seen on magazine covers and business news segments, whose name still made my chest tighten every time I heard it in passing. The man I had loved, the man I had left, the man who had no idea he had a son. Time folded in on itself. Same sharp jaw, same steady eyes that used to see right through me, same presence that used to make me feel like I could survive anything. But this wasn't the man I remembered. This man was different, calmer. There was a stillness to him now, a groundedness that hadn't existed before. The boy who chased empires had become a man who knew how to stand still. And he was looking at James like he'd been carved from something sacred. My throat closed. "I found him near the west entrance of the museum," William said quietly, his voice exactly as I remembered it. Low, steady, deliberate, every word measured. "He got separated from his group during the transition back to the buses. He panicked when he couldn't find his teacher." James pulled back just enough to look up at me, his face still blotchy from crying, his fingers gripping my sleeve. "He stayed with me the whole time, Mom. He didn't leave. He bought me water and told me it was going to be okay, and he kept saying my name so I wouldn't be scared." The words hit me harder than any accusation ever could. He stayed. William stayed, because that's what William always did when it mattered, except for the one time it counted most. The police were talking, teachers were apologizing. Other parents were murmuring words like miracle and thank God, and asking William for his name, his number, how they could repay him. He answered politely, briefly, but his eyes kept drifting back to James. And then, slowly, carefully, like he was afraid of what he might find, they lifted to mine. Recognition hit him like lightning. I watched it happen in real time. The slight widening of his eyes, the way his breath caught, the almost imperceptible step backward, as if the ground had shifted beneath him. "Danielle," he said. Just my name. But the way he said it carried 8 years of silence, 1,000 unanswered questions, and something that looked dangerously close to relief. I stood, pulling James up with me. My hand tightened around my son's smaller one. "Thank you," I managed. My voice sounded steadier than I felt. "For bringing him back." William nodded once, but he didn't move, and neither did I. The noise around us faded. The other parents, the teachers, the police, they all became background static. All I could see was William. All I could feel was James's hand in mine. And all I could think was, he knows. He didn't say it, didn't accuse, didn't demand. But I saw it in his eyes. The way they moved from my face to James's, then back again, then down to where our hands were joined. He was doing the math. 8-year-old boy, Danielle's son, dark hair, those eyes, the exact slope of his nose, the shape of his mouth when he smiled. How old is he? William asked quietly. The question hung in the air like smoke. Everyone around us was still talking, still moving, still existing in the normal world where field trips had happy endings and strangers were heroes and mothers said thank you and went home. But we weren't in that world anymore. 8, I said. William's jaw tightened. What's his name? James. James, William repeated as if testing the weight of it, then softer. That was your father's name. My throat burned. I nodded. James, bless him, was oblivious to the earthquake happening above his head. He was too busy wiping his nose on his sleeve and catching his breath, relieved to be found, ready to go home and forget this ever happened. If only it were that simple. Danielle, William's voice dropped even lower. We need to talk. 4 words. Calm, controlled, inevitable. James looked up at me, then at William, his little face confused. Mom, can he come with us? He asked, his voice small but hopeful. He said he'd make sure I got home safe. Out of the mouths of children, I opened my mouth to say no, to thank William again and leave before this moment became something I couldn't control. But then I looked at my son's face, at the way his hand, his left hand, the one not holding mine, was still loosely holding William's sleeve, at the way he looked at this stranger like he was something solid in a world that had just proven itself terrifying. And I knew I couldn't run this time. Yes, I heard myself say, he can come. William's expression didn't change, but something in his posture shifted, relaxed just slightly. I'll follow you, he said, not a question, a statement. I nodded. The police finished their paperwork. Teachers apologized 3 more times. Parents gave me sympathetic looks and relieved smiles and went back to their own children, grateful it wasn't them, grateful it was over. But it wasn't over, not even close. I walked James to our car, a 7-year-old Honda with a dent in the passenger door and a "My child is an honor student" sticker I'd put on as a joke. Behind us I heard the low hum of an engine that probably cost more than I'd made in 2 years. William was following, just like he said. James buckled himself into the back seat, still sniffling but calmer now. I adjusted the rearview mirror and caught a glimpse of a sleek black car pulling in behind us. My hands gripped the steering wheel. I started the engine. The drive home was 15 minutes. It felt like 15 hours. James talked the entire way, his voice gradually returning to normal as the fear wore off. He told me about the exhibits he'd seen, the dinosaur skeleton, the planetarium show, how he'd gotten distracted looking at the gift shop, and when he turned around, his class was gone. I got really scared, Mom, he admitted quietly. But then that man, William, he saw me and he asked if I was okay, and I told him I was lost, and he didn't leave. I'm glad he found you, baby. He's really nice. He told me about his office building. It has 52 floors, Mom. Can you imagine? I glanced in the rearview mirror. William's car was still there, steady, patient, waiting. Yeah, baby, I murmured. I can imagine. We pulled into the driveway of our small rental house. The lawn needed mowing. The paint on the shutters was peeling. There was a bike with training wheels lying on its side near the front steps. It was home. But seeing it through William's eyes, through the eyes of a man who owned penthouse suites and had his name on buildings, made it feel small in a way it never had before. I hated that feeling. I turned off the engine. William parked on the street. James unbuckled and ran inside, already yelling something about needing to use the bathroom and being hungry. And then it was just me and William, standing on my front lawn in the fading afternoon light. 8 years of silence pressing down on both of us like a weight we'd forgotten we were carrying. He didn't speak first. Neither did I. We just stood there, 2 people who used to know every inch of each other, now strangers separated by time and choices, and a truth that was about to crack wide open. Finally, William broke the silence. He's mine, isn't he? Not a question, a statement. And the way he said it, quiet, certain, devastated, told me everything I needed to know. William had already done the math. He'd already seen the truth written in James's face. And now, standing on the lawn of the life I'd built without him, there was only one thing left to do. Tell the truth, or destroy us all trying to keep the lie alive. The words hung in the air between us, like smoke from a fire I'd been trying to contain for 8 years. William stood on my lawn, the one I'd mowed myself every Saturday for 3 years, the one where James learned to ride his bike, the one that represented every inch of independence I'd fought for. And he looked at me like I'd just confirmed something he'd always suspected but never dared to believe. I should have answered immediately. Should have denied it or confirmed it or done something other than stand there frozen, my mouth dry, my heart hammering so hard I could feel it in my throat. But I couldn't speak, because the moment I admitted the truth out loud, everything changed. The life I'd built, the walls I'd constructed, the story I'd told myself about why leaving was the right choice. All of it would crumble. William took a step closer, not threatening, just closing the distance between past and present. "Danielle," he said quietly, "I need you to answer me." And I would. God help me, I would. But not yet, because first you need to understand what it felt like to stand face to face with the man I'd loved more than breathing, and realize that time hadn't done what I'd hoped it would. It hadn't made him easier to forget. It had made him impossible to deny. James's voice cut through the tension like a knife through silk. "Mom, I can't find the cookies." I turned toward the house, grateful for the interruption, but William's gaze never left my face. "Go," he said softly. "I'll wait." Of course he would. William Weathers had built an empire on patience and precision. Well, he could wait out anyone, even me. I walked inside on legs that didn't quite feel steady. James was in the kitchen, digging through the pantry with the single-minded determination of a child who'd survived trauma and now desperately needed normalcy. "Top shelf, baby," I managed, my voice sounding almost normal. "Behind the cereal." He found them. Chocolate chip, his favorite, and immediately stuffed 2 in his mouth, crumbs falling onto his shirt. He looked so young, so innocent, so unaware that his entire world was about to shift on its axis. "Is William still here?" he asked through a mouthful of cookie. My chest tightened. "Yeah, sweetheart. He's outside." "Can he stay for dinner?" The question hit me like cold water. I gripped the counter, my knuckles going white against the worn laminate. "Maybe not tonight, James." "But why?" He looked genuinely confused. "He's nice, and he stayed with me when I was scared." "You always say we should be grateful to people who help us." Out of the mouths of children, the very values I'd taught him, kindness, gratitude, loyalty, were now being used against the walls I'd built to protect us both. "You're right," I said carefully. "He is nice, and we are grateful. But grown-ups sometimes need to have conversations that are complicated." James tilted his head, studying me the way he did when he was trying to solve a math problem. "Is it because he's rich?" I blinked. "What?" "Kids at school say rich people are mean. But William isn't mean. He bought me water, and he didn't even ask for the money back." "No, baby," I said softly. "It's not because he's rich. It's because—" I trailed off. How do you explain to a child that his entire existence was a secret, that the man who saved him was the same man I'd run from? That looking at them side by side was like looking at a mirror reflecting past and future at the same time? You don't. Not yet. "Go wash your hands and change your clothes," I said instead. "I'll be right back." James nodded and disappeared down the hall, leaving me alone in the kitchen with the weight of what I had to do pressing down on my shoulders like an anchor. I walked back outside. William was leaning against his car on the street, giving me space but clearly not leaving. "He looks just like me," William said before I could speak. Not an accusation, just an observation weighted with 8 years of absence. And he was right. God, he was so right it hurt. But what William didn't know yet, what he'd find out soon enough, was that the resemblance went deeper than appearances. James had his stubbornness, his quiet determination, his way of tilting his head when he was thinking. I'd spent 8 years watching my son grow into the ghost of a man who didn't know he existed. "Yes," I said simply, because what else could I say? William exhaled slowly, and for the first time since he'd appeared in that parking lot, I saw the cracks in his composure. His jaw tightened, his shoulders tensed, his hands curled into loose fists in his pockets. "How long have you known?" he asked, his voice rough around the edges. "Since the day I took the test. And you didn't think I deserved to know?" There it was, the anger I'd been expecting, the resentment, the hurt. But it wasn't loud. It wasn't explosive. It was quiet and devastated, and somehow that was so much worse. I thought, I started, then stopped. How do you summarize 8 years of fear and survival and impossible choices in a single sentence? I thought I was protecting him. From me? The words came out barely above a whisper, but they landed like a slap. From uncertainty, I corrected. From a life where his father was too busy building an empire to remember he existed. William flinched, and that reaction, that tiny, involuntary movement, would echo through every conversation we had from that point forward. Because I just said out loud the thing I'd been holding in my chest for nearly a decade. And once words like that are released, you can't take them back. "You didn't give me a choice," he said, his voice steady but his eyes blazing. "You decided for both of us. You disappeared, changed your number. I looked for you, Danielle, for months." My breath caught. "You looked?" "Of course I looked." He stepped closer, and I could smell the familiar scent of his cologne, cedar and something darker, something that made every cell in my body remember what it felt like to be close to him. "You think I didn't notice when you stopped answering my calls? When your apartment was suddenly empty? When your friends claimed they didn't know where you'd gone? Sometimes we make decisions based on who we think people are, not who they actually are." I thought William had moved on. I thought he didn't care. I was wrong. If you've ever made a choice based on fear instead of truth, leave a comment. Tell me I'm not the only one who's been haunted by a decision she can't undo. "I couldn't stay," I said, my voice breaking. "You were choosing board meetings over breakfast. You were canceling dinners for conference calls. You were—" "Building a future," he interrupted, "for us. But there was no us anymore, William. There was you and your empire, and me waiting for scraps of your attention." Silence stretched between us, heavy and suffocating. Then William said something I didn't expect. "You're right." I stared at him. "I was obsessed," he continued, his voice quiet but firm. "I thought success meant something. I thought if I could just build something big enough, important enough, it would matter. But you left, and none of it mattered anymore. Nothing did." James appeared in the doorway behind me, his hair damp from washing his face, wearing clean clothes and that innocent, hopeful expression that children wear when they sense something important is happening but don't understand what. "Is William staying?" he asked. Both of us turned to look at him, and I watched William's face transform. The hard edges softened, the tension in his jaw released. His eyes, those eyes that had been demanding answers and accountability just seconds ago, filled with something I can only describe as wonder. "Hi, James," William said, his voice gentler than I'd heard it in years. "Hi." James walked over, standing between us like a bridge neither of us knew how to cross. "Are you and my mom friends?" William's gaze flicked to mine. A question, permission, uncertainty. "We used to be," I said carefully. "But not anymore? It's complicated, sweetheart." James considered this with the seriousness of a child who'd learned early that grown-up problems didn't have easy answers. Then he looked up at William with those wide, trusting eyes, his father's eyes, and asked the question that shattered us both. "Do you have any kids?" William's breath hitched. I saw it. That moment of recognition, of grief for the years he'd missed, of fury at what had been stolen from him. But when he answered, his voice was steady. "I do now." James frowned, confused. "You do?" William knelt, slowly, carefully, until he was at eye level with our son. Our son. The words felt foreign and right and terrifying all at once. "Yeah, buddy," William said softly. "I do." James looked at me, seeking confirmation, seeking permission, seeking some kind of explanation for why this stranger was looking at him like he was the answer to a question nobody had asked. And I knew. standing there on my front lawn with the past and present colliding in the space between heartbeats, that I couldn't run anymore. Not from this, not from him, not from the truth that was written in every line of my son's face. James, I said quietly, my voice trembling. William and I need to talk. Grown-up talk. Can you go inside and watch TV for a bit? But please, baby. He looked between us, sensing the weight of what was about to happen, then nodded and walked back inside, glancing over his shoulder one more time before the door closed behind him. And then it was just us again. Two people who used to be everything to each other, two people separated by 8 years of silence, and one undeniable truth. William stood slowly, his eyes never leaving mine. Danielle, he said, his voice low and firm and absolutely certain, we need to talk. 4 words I'd been running from for 8 years. We stood there on my front lawn, the space between us filled with everything unsaid. The sun was starting to dip lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the grass. And I realized with a sick twist in my stomach that we couldn't have this conversation here. Not where neighbors might hear, not where James might wander back outside. Come in, I said quietly. William followed me into the house, and I was suddenly, painfully aware of how small everything looked. The worn couch I'd bought secondhand, the crayon marks on the wall James had made when he was 4, the stack of bills on the kitchen counter I'd been avoiding. This was my life, the one I'd built from scratch, the one that didn't include penthouses or private cars or 52-story office buildings, and William was seeing all of it. I gestured to the couch. He sat. I stayed standing, arms wrapped around myself like I could physically hold the pieces together. I need you to understand something, I started, my voice steadier than I felt. When I left, I didn't do it to hurt you. Then why? The question was simple. The answer was anything but. Because the truth is, you never really know when a relationship is dying until you're standing in the ruins wondering when the last breath actually left. And that's what happened to us. We didn't explode. We suffocated. Do you remember the night of the Bennett acquisition? I asked. William's brow furrowed. Which one? I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Exactly. It was November. I remember because the heat had just broken in our apartment, and I was wearing 3 sweaters, waiting for the landlord to fix it. William had promised he'd be home by 8. We were supposed to celebrate our 3-year anniversary. I'd made dinner. Nothing fancy, but I'd tried. Roasted chicken, the kind his mother used to make. 8 o'clock came and went. 9, 10. At 11:30, I scraped the dried-out chicken into the trash and went to bed alone. He came home at 2 in the morning, smelling like champagne and success, and found me sitting in the dark. Danielle, I'm so sorry, he'd said, and I could hear the exhaustion in his voice, the genuine regret. The negotiations ran long. I couldn't leave. But we closed the deal. This is huge for us. Us. That word used to mean something different. I asked you one thing, I'd said quietly. One night. Just this one night. I know, and I'm sorry. I'll make it up to you, I promise. But he didn't, because 2 weeks later it was the Singapore contract, then the board meeting in New York, then the investor dinner that couldn't be rescheduled. And here's what nobody tells you about loving someone who's building an empire. You become a footnote, we'll get to that later, that never comes. A promise made in the dark that daylight erases. I remember being angry about that, William said quietly, pulling me back to the present. You stopped talking to me for 3 days. I stopped talking because there was no point, I said. You weren't listening. You were already gone, William, physically present but mentally in a boardroom, somewhere planning your next move. I was building something. I know what you were building, I cut him off, my voice sharper than intended. But you never asked what I was building, or what I needed, or if I could survive being second place to your ambition. Silence stretched between us, heavy with recognition. So you left, William said. I tried to leave, I corrected. Do you remember what you said? His jaw tightened. He remembered. I asked you to wait. Just 6 more months. The IPO was coming. Everything would calm down after that. And I believed you, I said softly. God help me, I believed you. What happened next, What I discovered 3 weeks after that conversation would make 6 more months feel like a lifetime I couldn't afford to give. I sat down across from him, my hands clasped so tightly my knuckles turned white. I stayed those 6 months, I continued. I waited through the IPO, through the press tours, through the nights you didn't come home. And when it was over, when you finally had time to breathe, do you know what you did? William's expression darkened. He knew. You started the expansion into Europe. It was an incredible opportunity. It was another excuse, I said, my voice breaking. Another 6 months. Another year. Another lifetime of being the person you loved when you had time to remember I existed. I wasn't asking for much. I just wanted to matter, to be chosen, to be more than the person who kept your bed warm when you bothered to come home. So I left, I said. For real this time. I packed everything while you were in London. I found a new apartment, changed my number, and I told myself I was doing the right thing, that I deserved someone who would choose me first. You did, William said quietly. You deserve better than what I gave you. The admission hung in the air between us, an apology 8 years too late. And then I found out I was pregnant. William's entire body went rigid. When? 2 weeks after I left. I was late, then I was nauseous. Then I was staring at a positive pregnancy test in a gas station bathroom, thinking my entire life just changed, and the one person who should have been there wasn't. You should have told me. And said what? I demanded, my voice rising. Come back, William. I'm pregnant, but nothing's changed. You're still going to choose board meetings over bedtime stories? You're still going to miss birthdays for business trips? Our child is still going to grow up wondering why his father's work matters more than he does. My hands were shaking now. I pressed them against my thighs, trying to steady myself, trying to hold together the pieces of a story I'd never told anyone. I couldn't do that to a child, I whispered. I couldn't bring him into a world where he'd spend his whole life competing with his father's ambition and losing. So I made a choice. The only choice that made sense at the time. You chose to disappear. I chose to survive. The words came out fierce, defensive, true. Sometimes survival looks like running. Sometimes it looks like staying silent. Sometimes it looks like raising a child alone, because that feels safer than sharing him with someone who might break his heart the same way yours was broken. If that makes me selfish, then I'm selfish. But I'd make the same choice again to protect my son. Share this if you understand that sometimes love means walking away. William stood, pacing to the window, his back to me. His shoulders were tense, his hands shoved deep in his pockets. I would have changed, he said, his voice rough. If I'd known, but you didn't know, and I couldn't risk it. Couldn't risk you promising to change and then not following through. Couldn't risk my son spending his childhood waiting for a father who was always somewhere else. So you made the decision for all of us. Yes, I said. I did. William turned, and the look on his face gutted me. Pain, anger, grief, all of it swirling in those eyes that James had inherited. Do you have any idea what you took from me? He asked quietly. I missed his first word, his first steps, his first day of school. 8 years, Danielle. 8 years of my son's life that I can never get back. You're right, I said, my voice steady. I took that from you, and I'd be lying if I said I didn't have regrets. But I don't regret protecting him. I don't regret giving him a stable childhood with a parent who was actually present, and I don't regret choosing his well-being over your feelings. Silence crashed between us. Then William did something I didn't expect. He sat back down, slowly, deliberately, and when he looked at me, the anger had been replaced by something else entirely. Acceptance. Tell me about him, he said quietly. Tell me everything. And that's when I realized I'd been wrong about William Weathers, not about who he was 8 years ago. That man did choose ambition over everything else. But the man sitting in front of me now, the one who'd stayed with a terrified child, who'd followed me home, who'd just absorbed the truth of his son's existence without threatening or demanding or destroying, that man was different. That man had changed. He's brilliant, I started, my voice soft. Stubborn, kind. He loves dinosaurs and soccer and reading. He can't tie his shoes, but he can multiply 2-digit numbers in his head. He laughs at his own jokes. He's terrible at keeping his room clean, and every single day he asks why he doesn't have a dad like the other kids. William's breath hitched. What do you tell him? That his dad had to be somewhere else, that it wasn't his fault, that he's loved. And he believes you? I shook my head. He's 8, not stupid. William stood, walked toward me, knelt in front of where I sat, his eyes level with mine. And then quietly, so quietly I almost didn't hear it, he said the 5 words that changed everything. He's my son, Danielle. Not a question, a claim, a promise, a beginning. He's my son, Danielle. William knelt in front of me, his eyes level with mine. And in that moment, everything I thought I knew about him shattered and reformed into something I didn't recognize. This wasn't the man who'd missed our anniversary for a business deal. This wasn't the man who'd chosen board meetings over breakfast. This was someone else entirely. Someone humbled by truth. Someone who looked at me like I was holding the keys to a kingdom he didn't know existed until now. Say something, he said quietly. I opened my mouth, but words wouldn't come. Because what do you say to the man you erased from your child's life? What do you say when that man looks at you without rage, without accusation, but with something that looks dangerously close to understanding? I don't expect forgiveness, William continued, his voice steady. What I did to you, the way I made you feel invisible, there's no excuse for that. But James, he paused and I watched his throat work as he swallowed hard. He didn't choose this. He didn't ask to grow up without a father. And I need you to give me the chance to be what he deserves. This isn't about money, I said, my voice firmer than I felt. You can't buy your way into his life, William. You can't show up with expensive toys and think that makes you a father. I know that. Do you? I stood, putting distance between us, needing space to breathe, because the William I knew solved every problem with his checkbook. New restaurant opens up? Buy it. Want better seats? Pay for them. Girlfriend upset? Send flowers and assume that fixes it. William stood slowly, his hands loose at his sides. Not defensive, just open. You're right, he said. That's exactly who I was. But Danielle, I'm not asking to buy my way in. I'm asking for the chance to show up. Actually show up. Not with money or power or anything except myself. Words are easy, William. Then let me prove it with actions. I wanted to say no. Wanted to protect the life I'd built. The routine that worked. The safety of a world where I controlled every variable. But then I heard it. Footsteps. Small, hesitant footsteps coming down the hallway. James appeared in the doorway, his eyes moving between us with that particular brand of childhood intuition that misses nothing. Are you guys fighting? He asked quietly. No, baby, I said quickly. We're just talking. It sounds like fighting. He walked over to me, pressing himself against my side. Is William leaving? I felt James's small hand grip my shirt, felt his body tense against mine, felt the fear radiating off him in waves. He'd already been lost once today. Already felt the terror of abandonment, and now he was watching the man who'd saved him potentially walk away. William saw it too. I watched recognition flash across his face, watched him process James's fear in real time, and then he did something that broke me completely. He knelt again, but this time, he knelt for James. Hey, buddy, William said gently. I'm not leaving, not unless your mom tells me to. And even then, he glanced at me, something vulnerable flickering in his eyes. Even then, I'd like to come back, if that's okay. James looked up at me. Is it okay, Mom? I need to talk to William more, I said carefully. Grown-up stuff. But yes, sweetheart, he can come back. Tomorrow. William's breath caught. I heard it, that tiny inhale of hope and disbelief. We'll see, I managed. James seemed satisfied with that. He let go of my shirt and walked over to William, studying him with the open curiosity of childhood. Do you like dinosaurs? James asked. William smiled, a real smile, not the polished CEO smile I remembered, but something genuine and warm. I used to have a whole collection when I was your age. Really? What was your favorite? Velociraptor. James's eyes widened. That's mine too. Mom says they were actually smaller than in the movies and had feathers. Your mom's right. She usually is. The words landed between us like a confession. My phone buzzed. Then again. Then 3 more times in rapid succession. I pulled it out, frowning at the screen. 7 missed calls, 12 text messages, all from numbers I didn't recognize. What the hell? I muttered, scrolling through them. William's expression darkened. What is it? I looked up at him, then at the messages, then back at him. Someone posted about you finding James. It's going viral. William was at my side in 2 strides, looking at my phone. His jaw tightened as he scrolled through the messages, the comments, the photo someone had taken of him walking James through the parking lot. I'll handle this, he said immediately. Handle what? William, there are reporters asking for interviews. Someone posted our address. My voice rose in panic. Someone posted where we live. James was watching us, confusion giving way to fear. Mom, what's wrong? Before I could answer, headlights swept across the front window. Then another set, then another. No, I whispered. William moved to the window, his expression hardening. There are 3 news vans outside. My stomach dropped. This can't be happening. Stay inside, William said, his voice shifting into something commanding, protective. Both of you, don't answer the door. Don't answer calls from numbers you don't know. What are you going to do? He was already heading for the door. What I should have done 8 years ago. Put you and my son first. This is what happens when your private life becomes public entertainment, when strangers think they have the right to your story. But watch what William does next, because this is what real protection looks like. Not words, action, hit subscribe, because what unfolds in the next few moments will show you exactly what kind of man he'd become. I watched him walk out that door, watched him stride across the lawn toward the cluster of reporters already shouting questions, cameras flashing, microphones extended. And for the first time since he'd appeared in that parking lot, I saw the man he'd become when he wasn't trying to prove anything. Through the window, I could see William positioning himself between our house and the cameras. Could see him raise one hand, his voice carrying even through the glass. My name is William Weathers. I'll make one statement, and then you will leave this property and this family alone. The reporters surged forward, but William didn't flinch. Earlier today, I had the privilege of helping a child who was separated from his school group. That child is safe. His family is safe. And that is the only part of this story that matters. There will be no interviews, no follow-up questions, no photos of this house or this family. If any of you violate their privacy, you'll be hearing from my legal team. Are we clear? I stood at that window with my son pressed against my side, and I watched the man I'd once loved shield us from a chaos he hadn't created, but was willing to face alone. And something inside me, something I'd been holding tight for 8 years, finally started to loosen. The reporters tried to ask questions. William ignored them. He stood there, immovable, until one by one the vans pulled away, their occupants realizing they wouldn't get what they came for. Only when the last one left did William turn back to the house. He walked inside, closed the door behind him, and locked it. They're gone, he said quietly. But Danielle, this isn't over. More will come. The story's out there now. What do? We protect James, whatever it takes. He'd said we. James tugged on William's sleeve. Are those people gone? Yeah, buddy, they're gone. Good. James paused, then looked up at William with those wide, trusting eyes. Can you come back tomorrow? William's gaze met mine over James's head. A question, permission, hope. And I realized I was standing at a crossroads I'd never expected to face. Say yes and risk everything I'd built to protect us. Say no and watch my son's hope crumble. But before I could answer, William knelt one more time, meeting James at eye level. If your mom says yes, William said gently, then I'll be here. Tomorrow, and the day after that, and every day after that if she lets me. James turned to me, his expression so hopeful it physically hurt. Can he, Mom? Can he come back tomorrow? Can he, Mom? Can he come back tomorrow? James's question hung in the air like a prayer I wasn't sure I was ready to answer. I looked at my son's hopeful face, then at William, still kneeling on my living room floor, looking at me like his entire future depended on my next words, and I realized I'd already lost this battle the moment William had walked into that parking lot holding James's hand. Yes, I heard myself say, he can come back tomorrow. But here's what I didn't say out loud. Tomorrow was going to come with rules, with boundaries, with every protective instinct I'd honed over 8 years standing guard between William Weathers and my son's heart. That was 3 weeks ago. 3 weeks of William showing up, actually showing up, not with gifts wrapped in apology, not with grand gestures designed to overwhelm my defenses, just presence. The first Tuesday, he arrived at 6:30 in the evening with takeout from the Thai place I used to love. He remembered. Pad see yubu, extra vegetables, no peanuts because James was allergic. He'd remembered my son was allergic to peanuts from a single conversation. We ate at my small kitchen table, James chattering about school, while William listened with the kind of attention that made my chest ache. This was the William I'd fallen in love with, before ambition had consumed him. Present, focused, actually there. I watched William's hand hover near James's juice cup when it got too close to the edge of the table. Watched him wipe sauce from James's chin with a napkin. Watched him laugh, really laugh, when James told a joke that wasn't even funny. And I felt something dangerous stir in my chest. Thursday, he showed up for James's soccer practice, stood on the sidelines with the other parents, cheering when James scored, groaning when he missed. One of the other mothers asked if he was my husband. No, I'd said too quickly. He's James's father. The words felt foreign on my tongue, but also right. What I didn't know then, what I couldn't have predicted, was that saying those words out loud would start a chain reaction I had no idea how to stop. By the second week, James started asking when William was coming over. Not if. When. He said he'd help me with my science project, James announced one afternoon. We're building a volcano. Oh, that's nice. And he's coming to the parent-teacher conference next week. I froze, my hand hovering over the dishwasher. What? I invited him. You said he's my dad, so he should come, right? How do you explain to an 8-year-old that his logic is perfect and terrifying at the same time? That yes, William is his father, but letting him into school meetings and science projects feels like opening a door I've kept barricaded for nearly a decade? James, I'm not sure. Please, Mom. Tyler's dad is coming, and Emma's. Why can't mine? The word mine hit me like a fist to the chest. William wasn't just my ex anymore. He was James's dad, and my son was claiming him. The parent-teacher conference was on a Wednesday. I arrived early, clutching James's report card folder like a shield, and found William already there, wearing a suit that probably cost more than my monthly rent. But somehow he'd loosened the tie, rolled up the sleeves, made himself look accessible. You came, I said. You thought I wouldn't? I don't know what I thought. Mrs. Patterson, James's teacher, smiled warmly as we sat down. Mr. and Mrs. Weathers, thank you for coming. Oh, we're not, I started. Just here for James, William finished smoothly, sparing me the explanation. Mrs. Patterson opened James's file. James is doing wonderfully. He's excelling in math and reading, though he does tend to get distracted during silent reading time, I finished. I know. He wants to talk about the books instead of reading them. Exactly, Mrs. Patterson laughed. Has he always been like this? Since he was 3, I said. He'd bring me the same book 15 times a day asking questions. He gets that from his mother, William said quietly, his eyes on me. She never accepted surface-level answers either. The words hung between us, intimate and familiar, and I felt my cheeks flush. Mrs. Patterson cleared her throat, sensing something she couldn't quite name. Well, James is lucky to have 2 engaged parents, though I do have one concern. My stomach tightened. What is it? James has been asking a lot of questions about fathers lately, about why some kids have them and others don't. Has something changed at home? I opened my mouth, but no words came. William leaned forward. I've recently become part of James's life. We're navigating what that looks like. I see. Mrs. Patterson's expression softened. That explains the essay he wrote last week. Essay? I asked. She pulled out a sheet of paper covered in James's careful handwriting. The prompt was someone special. James wrote about his father. My breath caught. William's hand resting on the table between us had gone completely still. Mrs. Patterson began reading. My dad is tall and has eyes like me. He found me when I was lost and he stayed with me. My mom says he's been far away, but now he's here. I think he's brave, and I think he loves my mom even though she acts weird when he's around. My face burned. William's expression was unreadable. Mrs. Patterson smiled. It's a beautiful essay. James clearly cares about both of you very much. The rest of the meeting passed in a blur. When we finally escaped to the parking lot, I couldn't look at William. He thinks you love me, I said, staring at my car keys. Danielle, he thinks you love me and I act weird around you, that's not, is it not? William asked quietly. I finally looked up. He was watching me with an intensity that made my pulse quicken. Don't, I whispered. Don't make this more complicated than it already is. It's already complicated. It's been complicated since the moment I saw you in that parking lot. We drove separately to my house, William following in his sleek car that looked absurd parked on my street. Inside, James was already working on his volcano with the supplies William had brought the night before. Baking soda, vinegar, food coloring, the works. Did Mrs. Patterson say I'm doing good? James asked without looking up. You're doing great, buddy, William said, settling on the floor beside him. She's very proud of you. Did she show you my essay? I froze in the kitchen doorway. William didn't miss a beat. She did. It was really well written. I meant everything I said, James announced. You are brave, and you do make Mom act weird. James, I protested. He grinned, that mischievous smile that was pure William. What? You do. You get all nervous and talk really fast and… How about we focus on this volcano? I interrupted desperately. For the next hour, I watched them work together. William's large hands guiding James's smaller ones as they mixed the solution. James's laughter echoing through my small living room. The way William looked at our son, like he was memorizing every moment, storing it away against the years he'd missed. And I felt it. That terrible, wonderful, devastating feeling of my carefully constructed walls beginning to crumble. One of the other soccer moms called that evening, Ashley, the one with the perfect house and the judgmental smile. So, she said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. That's William Weathers? The billionaire? Yes. And you kept James from him for 8 years. My grip tightened on the phone. It's complicated. I bet. Must be nice, though. Finally telling him. I mean, the child support alone. I hung up. My hands were shaking when William knocked on the door 10 minutes later. He'd gone home to change, but had come back, like he'd promised James he would. What's wrong? He asked immediately. Nothing. Just people talk. What are they saying? I shook my head, but he stepped closer, his expression darkening. Danielle, what are they saying? That I'm a gold digger, that I kept James from you so I could trap you later, that I'm… Stop. His voice was sharp, then softer. Stop. Anyone who knows you for 5 minutes knows that's ridiculous. You don't understand. These women, they… Give me names, I blinked. What? Names. Of anyone who's making you feel like you did something wrong, because you didn't. You survived. You protected our son, and I will personally make sure everyone in this town knows that. James's voice interrupted from the living room. Dad, the volcano's ready. The room went silent, complete, total, silence. James froze, his eyes going wide as he realized what he'd said. William stood completely still, his expression unreadable, and I stopped breathing. I mean, James stammered, William, sorry, I didn't… Say it again, William said quietly. What? William crossed the room, kneeling in front of James. Say it again, buddy. James looked at me uncertain. I nodded, unable to speak. And then my son, my beautiful, brave son, looked up at the man who'd found him and said the word that changed everything. Dad. That's the moment everything shifted. Not when I admitted the truth, not when William demanded answers. But when my son stood between us and called him Dad for the first time. If you felt that shift in your chest, hit that like button. because some moments are too sacred to face alone. Dad. The word echoed through my living room like a bell that couldn't be unrung. William pulled James into his arms, and I watched my son's small body disappear into his father's embrace, watched William's shoulders shake, watched 8 years of absence transform into a single moment of presence that mattered more than all the years before it. I turned away, blinking hard against tears I hadn't given myself permission to shed. This was what I'd wanted, wasn't it? For James to have a father, for William to show up. So why did it feel like I was losing something I couldn't name? What I didn't know, what none of us knew that night, was that the moment was being recorded, photographed, captured through a neighbor's window, and sold to the highest bidder before James had even gone to bed. By morning, we were everywhere. My phone started buzzing at 6:45 a.m. I ignored it, stumbling into the kitchen to make James's breakfast, exhaustion pulling at my bones. Then I saw the text from my neighbor, Sarah, the one who actually liked me. "I'm so sorry. Check the news." My stomach dropped. I opened my laptop with shaking hands and typed William's name into the search bar. The first headline made my blood run cold. Billionaire CEO William Weathers' secret son, the child he never knew existed. Below it, a photo. William kneeling in my living room, James in his arms. The angle perfectly framed to show the resemblance. The intimacy. The story, I scrolled. Each headline worse than the last. Hidden heir. How one woman kept a fortune from its rightful owner. William Weathers reunites with 8-year-old son after child goes missing. Gold digger or protective mother. The truth behind the Weathers scandal. My hands went numb. The laptop screen blurred. I could hear my pulse in my ears, a rushing sound like water over rocks, drowning out everything except the terrible realization that my private life, James's private life, had just become public entertainment. My phone rang, unknown number, then another, then 5 more in rapid succession. I stumbled to James's room. He was still asleep, his hair sticking up the way it always did, his small chest rising and falling peacefully. He had no idea his world was about to explode. And here's what nobody tells you about becoming a headline. You stop being human. You become a story, a villain or a victim, a gold digger or a martyr. Never just a woman who made an impossible choice and did her best. I called William. He answered on the first ring. "I know, I've seen it." "How did they?" "Someone sold a photo. Probably a neighbor." "Danielle, I'm so sorry. I'm handling it." "Handling it?" My voice rose. "William, they're calling me a gold digger. They're saying I trapped you. They're saying—" My voice broke. "They're going to come after James." "No." His voice was steel. "They're not. I won't let them. You can't control this. Watch me." He hung up. 20 minutes later, my doorbell rang. I looked through the peephole and my heart stopped. Cameras, microphones. At least a dozen reporters camped on my front lawn. "Miss Faye, Salisbury, can you comment on your relationship with William Weathers? Did you know he was a billionaire when you got pregnant? How much child support are you asking for?" I backed away from the door, my breath coming in short gasps. James appeared in the hallway, rubbing his eyes. "Mom, what's all that noise?" "Stay in your room, baby." "But now, James, please." He heard the fear in my voice and obeyed, his small face confused and scared. I grabbed my phone, hands shaking so badly I could barely type. "They're at my house. James is terrified." "What do I do?" William's response was immediate. "Don't open the door. Don't say anything. I'm coming." He arrived in less than 20 minutes. I watched through the window as his car pulled up, sleek and black, and completely out of place on my modest street. The reporters swarmed him immediately, cameras flashing, questions overlapping into incomprehensible noise. But William didn't duck his head, didn't hide. He stood in front of them, tall and immovable, and waited until they quieted. "I'll make one statement," he said, his voice carrying across my lawn with the authority of someone who'd commanded boardrooms for a decade. "After this, you will leave this property. You will not contact Miss Salisbury. You will not approach or photograph her son. If you do, you'll be hearing from my legal team. Are we clear?" A reporter shouted a question. William ignored it. 8 years ago, I was in a relationship with Danielle Salisbury. We were young. I was ambitious to the point of obsession. I prioritized my career over the woman I loved, and I lost her because of it. What I didn't know, what she had no obligation to tell me, was that she was pregnant. Danielle Salisbury is not a gold digger. She's not a liar. She's not any of the things you've called her in your headlines and comments. She's a woman who made an impossible choice to protect her child from a father who wasn't ready to be present, and she was right to do it. The cameras clicked furiously. Questions exploded. William held up a hand. I was not the man my son deserved. I was not the man Danielle deserved. But I'm here now and I will spend the rest of my life proving that I've changed. James is my son, and Danielle is... He paused, his eyes finding my window. Danielle is the mother of my child, the woman who sacrificed everything to give him a good life. And anyone who suggests otherwise will answer to me personally. This is what real protection looks like. Not hiding behind PR statements, not letting others control the narrative, but standing in front of the people you love and refusing to let the world touch them. Share this if you believe that's what everyone deserves, someone who will face the fire for you. As for child support, financial arrangements, or any suggestion that this is about money, I'll say this once. Danielle has asked me for nothing, not a dollar, not a favor, not anything except the chance to be a father to our son. And that privilege? That's priceless. A reporter tried to interrupt. Mr. Weathers, is it true that... We're done here, William said flatly. Anyone still on this property in 5 minutes will be escorted away by police. Have a good day. He walked toward my house, ignoring the questions shouted at his back, and knocked once before I opened the door. He stepped inside, and I closed it behind him, my whole body trembling. You didn't have to do that, I whispered. Yes, I did. William, your reputation means nothing if my son thinks his father is ashamed of him. The words hit me like a physical force. I stepped back, my hand pressed against my chest, trying to catch my breath around the emotion lodged in my throat. Where is he? William asked. His room. He's scared. William walked down the hallway without hesitation, knocked gently on James's door, and let himself in. I followed, standing in the doorway as William knelt beside James's bed. Hey, buddy, William said softly. James looked up from where he'd been hiding under his blankets. Why are those people here? Because sometimes grown-ups are nosy. They want to know things that aren't their business. Are they mad at you? Maybe, but I don't care. Why not? William reached out, gently brushing James's hair back from his forehead. Because the only opinions that matter to me are yours and your mom's. Everyone else is just noise. I watched my son's face transform, watched fear melt into relief, watched him sit up and throw his arms around William's neck like he'd been waiting his whole life for permission to do it. I love you, Dad, James said into William's shoulder. William's eyes closed. His arms tightened around our son. I love you too, James, so much. And I'm never going to let anyone hurt you, I promise. The reporters eventually left. The headlines continued for days. But William's statement shifted the narrative. Slowly, the vitriol turned to curiosity, then to something resembling understanding. A week later, Forbes requested an interview. William declined. His publicist called, begging him to do damage control, to spin the story, to use it as a humanizing moment for his brand. He fired her. I'm not using my son to sell anything, he told me over dinner at my kitchen table. Not my image, not my company, nothing. I stared at him across my worn tablecloth, trying to reconcile this man with the one I'd left 8 years ago. What happened to you? I asked quietly. William looked up. What do you mean? You're different. I struggled for the word. You're not the man I left. Good, he said simply. That man wasn't worth staying for. And that's when I realized, truly realized, that William Weathers wasn't trying to become the man I needed him to be. He already was. And that truth was about to complicate everything I thought I knew about second chances and closed doors and hearts that had spent 8 years learning how not to hope. James laughed at something in the living room, and William's face softened in a way I'd never seen before. Thank you, I said. For what? For putting him first. For standing in front of those cameras. My voice caught. For being what he needs. William's eyes found mine across the table, and the look in them made my pulse quicken. I'm not doing this for gratitude, Danielle. Then why? He leaned forward, his voice dropping low. Because I spent 8 years wondering what I'd lost. And now I know. I lost everything that mattered, and I'll do whatever it takes to keep from losing it again. The air between us shifted, charged, dangerous, and for the first time since he'd walked back into my life, I let myself admit the truth I'd been hiding. William Weathers wasn't just James's father. He was the man I'd never stopped loving, and that terrified me more than any headline ever could. I stopped sleeping. It started 3 nights after William's press conference. After the headlines shifted, after the world decided maybe I wasn't a villain after all. I should have felt relief. Instead, I lay awake at 2 a.m. staring at my ceiling, listening to James's soft breathing from down the hall, and feeling walls closing in that I'd spent 8 years building. William was everywhere now. Morning soccer practice, afternoon homework sessions, weekend pancake breakfasts where he'd somehow learned that James liked blueberries but not strawberries, that he cut his pancakes into squares instead of triangles, that he only drank orange juice if it didn't have pulp. He was learning my son, our son, and every detail William absorbed felt like a piece of territory I was losing. I stood at the kitchen window on a Tuesday morning, watching William teach James how to tie his shoes. Something I'd tried to teach him 100 times, but somehow when William showed him, James got it on the third try. "See?" William said, his voice patient. "Bunny ears, then one loops around the other." "I did it!" James's face lit up with pride. "You did, buddy. That's amazing." James looked toward the kitchen window where I stood. "Mom, did you see?" I forced a smile. "I saw, baby." "That's great." But inside something twisted. This is what they don't tell you about co-parenting with someone who wasn't there from the beginning. Every milestone they witness feels like a reminder of everything they missed, and everything you had to do alone. Every connection they build with your child feels like proof that maybe you weren't as essential as you thought. That night, after James went to bed, William lingered by the door like he'd been doing lately. "You're quiet," he observed. "Just tired." "Danielle?" He stepped closer. "Talk to me. There's nothing to talk about. You've barely looked at me in 3 days." I kept my eyes on the dishes I was washing, my hands moving mechanically. "I've been busy." "You're pulling away." The observation landed like an accusation. "I'm not." "Yes, you are." His voice was gentle but firm. "Every time I get close, you find a reason to create distance. What's going on?" My hands stilled in the soapy water. I gripped the edge of the sink, my knuckles going white, my breath coming shorter. The kitchen suddenly felt too small, too warm, too full of a man who saw too much. "Maybe this was a mistake," I heard myself say. Silence. Complete, devastating silence. "What was a mistake?" William asked quietly. "This. Letting you in. Letting James get attached. I built a life, William, a good life. We were fine." "Were you?" I spun around. "Yes, we were fine. We didn't need—" "Me?" he finished. "You didn't need me?" "I didn't say that. But you meant it." He stepped closer, his expression unreadable. "Danielle, what is this really about?" "You're good with him," I said, my voice cracking. "You're really good with him. And he loves you. He asks for you constantly. When is Dad coming? Where is Dad? Can Dad stay for dinner? And that's bad? It's terrifying." The words burst out of me. "Because what happens when you leave? When you get bored or busy or remember you have a company to run? When the novelty wears off and this stops being interesting?" William's jaw tightened. "I'm not leaving. You don't know that." "Yes, I do." "No, you don't." My voice rose despite my efforts to control it. "People leave, William. They promise they won't, and then they do. They choose something else, someone else. And I will not let my son's heart break the way mine did." The confession hung between us like shattered glass. William stared at me, something raw and painful flickering across his face. "Is that what this is about?" he asked softly. "You're not afraid I'll hurt James. You're afraid I'll hurt you again. I need you to go." "No, William." "No," he repeated, his voice firmer. "We're not doing this. You don't get to push me away because you're scared. This is my house. And that's my son sleeping down the hall, he interrupted. Our son. Who told me tonight that he wishes I lived here? Who asked me why some kids have their dads at home and he doesn't? What do you want me to tell him, Danielle? That his mother won't let me stay because she's afraid? The words hit like physical blows. That's not fair. None of this is fair. For the first time, William's composure cracked. You want to know what's not fair? I missed 8 years. I missed his first steps, his first words, his first day of school. I missed everything, and I can't get that back. But I'm here now. I'm showing up every single day, and you're looking for reasons to shut me out because it's safer than risking being hurt again. You did hurt me, my voice broke. You chose everything else over me, over us. Why would I trust that you won't do it again? Because I'm not that man anymore. How do I know that? William stepped closer, his eyes blazing with emotion I'd never seen before. Because that man would have sent lawyers instead of showing up himself. That man would have used money to buy access instead of earning it. That man would have cared more about his reputation than his son's well-being. I am not him, Danielle, and if you can't see that by now, then you're not even looking. This is the moment when fear makes you push away the thing you actually want. If you've ever sabotaged something good because you were terrified it wouldn't last, comment below, because isolation is the enemy, and we need to stop pretending we have to be strong enough to do everything alone. Tears spilled down my cheeks. I see it. God, William, I see it. That's what terrifies me. His expression softened. Why? Because if you're different, if you've actually changed, then I don't have an excuse anymore. I can't hide behind the past. I can't protect myself by keeping you at arm's length. And that means, what? He asked gently. That means I have to risk it. Risk trusting you. Risk letting you matter. Risk everything I've built to protect us. William closed the distance between us, his hands coming up to frame my face. Danielle, look at me. I did. Those eyes that James had inherited, filled with something that looked dangerously like forever. I'm not going anywhere, he said quietly. Not from him, not from you. I know you don't believe me yet. I know I have to prove it, but I will. Every single day for the rest of my life, if that's what it takes. What if it's not enough? I whispered. What if I can't? Then we'll figure it out together. But you have to let me try. You have to stop running. A sound from the hallway made us both freeze. James stood in his pajamas, his eyes red from crying, his small body trembling. Are you fighting? He asked, his voice small and terrified. Is Dad leaving? My heart shattered. William was on his knees in seconds, pulling James into his arms. No, buddy, I'm not leaving. Your mom and I were just talking. Grown-up stuff. But Mom's crying. Sometimes grown-ups cry when they're trying to figure things out. But I promise you, James, I'm not going anywhere, okay? James pulled back, looking at his father with those wide, trusting eyes. Promise? I promise. Then James turned to me, and what he said next broke every defense I had left. Mom, please don't make him go. I need him. I need my dad. The words hit me like a wave, stealing my breath, filling my lungs with emotion I couldn't contain. I sank down beside them, my hand reaching out to touch James's tear-stained face. Baby, I'm not. You are, James insisted. You get sad when he's here. You act like you want him to leave. But I don't want him to leave, ever. William's eyes found mine over James's head. A question, a plea, a promise. And I realized with devastating clarity that this wasn't about me anymore. Wasn't about my fear or my walls or my carefully constructed safety. This was about my son, our son, who needed his father, who had already lost 8 years, who deserved better than a mother too scared to let him have what he'd been asking for his entire life. I'm sorry, I whispered to James. Then looking at William, I'm sorry, to both of you. William's hand covered mine where it rested on James's shoulder. We're okay, he said quietly. We're going to be okay. James sniffled. So Dad can stay? I looked at William, really looked at him, at the man who'd shown up every day, who'd defended us publicly, who'd put his son first in every way that mattered. And I made the choice I'd been avoiding for weeks. Yeah, baby, I said softly. Dad can stay. James's face lit up, and he threw his arms around both of us, pulling us into a clumsy three-way hug that felt like a beginning I hadn't seen coming. But as William's arms came around us both, I found myself whispering the truth I'd been too afraid to admit. I'm afraid to lose him. And you. William's grip tightened. Then don't let go. Then don't let go. William's words echoed in my head for days after that night. After James had fallen asleep between us on the couch, his small body warm and trusting. After William had carried him to bed with the kind of care that made my chest ache. After he'd kissed James's forehead and whispered, I love you, buddy, like he'd been saying it his whole life. After he'd looked at me in the doorway and said, I meant what I said, Danielle. All of it. 2 weeks later, William showed up at my door with news that changed everything. I bought a house, he said without preamble. I blinked, coffee mug halfway to my lips. What? 3 blocks from here, 4 bedrooms, good school district. There's a backyard for James. He paused, his expression vulnerable in a way I'd never seen before. I want to be close, not just for visits. Close enough that if James needs me at 2 a.m., I can be here in 5 minutes. The coffee mug trembled in my hands. I set it down carefully on the counter, my fingers gripping the edges to steady myself. You bought a house here, in this neighborhood. Yes. William, you have a penthouse downtown. You have a life I'm restructuring, he interrupted gently. I've promoted Elena to COO. She'll handle day-to-day operations. I'm stepping back from the board, cutting my travel by 70%. You're what? He stepped closer, his eyes never leaving mine. I'm choosing differently this time. I'm choosing what matters. What I didn't say, what I couldn't say yet, was that watching William choose us was more terrifying than watching him leave had ever been. Because now there was something to lose, something real, something that felt dangerously close to everything I'd ever wanted. When do you move in? I asked quietly. 2 weeks, but Danielle, he hesitated. I'm not doing this to pressure you. I'm doing it for James, so he knows his father isn't temporary, that I'm here, that I'm staying. The words settled over me like a promise I was afraid to trust and desperate to believe. 3 days before William's move, everything fell apart. I got the call at work. The school nurse, her voice tight with controlled panic. Miss Salisbury, there's been an incident. James is fine, but what happened? There was an altercation on the playground. Another student pushed James. He fell and hit his head. We've called an ambulance as a precaution. The world tilted. I don't remember the drive to the hospital. Don't remember parking or running through the emergency room doors or demanding to know where my son was. I only remember seeing James on a gurney, a bandage on his forehead, his eyes wide and scared, and feeling like every worst fear I'd ever had was crystallizing in that single moment. Mom! He reached for me and I was there, pulling him against me, checking for injuries, counting heartbeats, making sure he was real and whole and safe. I'm here, baby. I'm here. You're okay. It hurts, he whimpered. I know. I know. The doctors are going to help. A nurse appeared with forms, questions about insurance and medical history and consent. I answered automatically, my hands shaking so badly I could barely sign my name. Is there anyone else we should call? The nurse asked. Father? Partner? I opened my mouth to say no, the automatic response after 8 years of being the only name on every form. But James answered first. My dad. Call my dad. He needs to know I'm okay. I'll call him, I managed. But before I could pull out my phone, the ER doors burst open and William appeared, his face pale, his eyes wild, his normally perfect suit rumpled like he'd run through fire to get here. Where is he? He demanded. Bay 4, the nurse said, but William was already moving. He found us behind the curtain, and when his eyes landed on James, on the bandage, the tears, the small, fragile body on that oversized gurney, something in his expression cracked completely. James, he breathed, crossing the space in 2 strides. His hands hovered over our son, afraid to touch, afraid he'd cause more pain. Buddy, are you okay? My head hurts, James said, fresh tears spilling over. And I'm scared. I know, but you're going to be fine. I promise. William looked at me over James's head. What did the doctors say? Possible mild concussion. They want to run some tests. CT scan to be safe. William nodded, his jaw tight. Then he did something that broke me completely. He pulled out his phone and made a call. Dr. Richardson, it's William Weathers. I need you at County General immediately. My son was injured. I need the best. A pause. I don't care. Cancel it. Get here. He hung up and looked at me, expecting anger or resistance. But all I felt was overwhelming gratitude. Thank you, I whispered. His hand found mine, squeezed once. Always. The CT scan came back clear. Minor concussion. Rest and observation. James would be fine. But watching William hold our son's hand through every test, watching him ask questions I hadn't thought to ask, watching him be exactly where James needed him to be, something inside me finally surrendered. Later that night, after James fell asleep in his hospital bed with William in a chair beside him, and me curled up on the uncomfortable couch, I let myself cry. Quietly. Completely. 8 years of fear and exhaustion, and the terrible weight of doing everything alone finally breaking free. William noticed. Of course he noticed. He crossed the dark room and knelt beside the couch, his hand gentle on my shoulder. Danielle. I'm fine, I lied. No, you're not. The tears came harder. I was so scared. When they called and said he was hurt, My voice broke. I couldn't breathe. All I could think was, what if I lost him? What if... But you didn't. He's okay. But what if next time? Then I'll be there, William interrupted firmly. Whatever happens, whenever it happens, I'll be there. You don't have to carry this alone anymore. I don't know how to do this, I confessed. How to let someone in, how to trust that you'll stay. Then let me show you, every day, for as long as it takes. I looked at him through tears. William, I love you, he said quietly, simply, like it was the most obvious truth in the world. I never stopped, not in 8 years. Not for a single day. And I know you don't trust that yet. I know I have to earn it. But Danielle, I love you, and I love our son, and I want... He paused, swallowing hard. I want the chance to be a family, a real one. Not visits and schedules, not splitting time, just us. The words hung in the air between us, heavy and hopeful and absolutely terrifying. I could hear James's soft breathing from across the room, could hear the beep of monitors and the distant sound of hospital quarters, could hear my own heart hammering in my chest. I'm scared, I whispered. I know. What if we mess it up? What if we hurt James? Then we'll fix it, together. But Danielle, what if we don't? What if this actually works? This is what courage looks like. Not the absence of fear, but choosing to move forward anyway. If you're standing at this crossroads between safety and possibility, I need you to know you're not alone. Subscribe, because what Danielle chooses next will determine everything, and you need to see how this ends. Silence stretched between us, filled with everything unsaid. Then William stood, looked at me with those eyes that I'd never been able to forget, and asked the question that would change all of our lives. Can we try again, Danielle? All three of us. Not as exes trying to co-parent, but as a family. Can we try? I opened my mouth to answer, to say yes or no or something in between. But before I could speak, James's small voice cut through the darkness. Please say yes, Mom. We both turned. James was awake, his eyes bright despite the exhaustion, looking at us with the kind of hope that children carry before the world teaches them to doubt. Were you listening? I asked. I've been awake the whole time, he admitted. And Mom, I want Dad to stay, not just visit, stay, like a real family, like Tyler's family, like Emma's. Please. William's eyes never left mine, waiting, hoping, giving me the space to choose. And I realized I'd already made my choice. I'd made it the moment William knelt beside me, the moment he said he loved me, the moment I'd watched him restructure his entire life around our son. I'd made it the second James had called him Dad, and I hadn't corrected it. The answer had always been yes. I just hadn't been brave enough to say it until now. Yes, I whispered. Yes. The word hung in the hospital room like the first note of a song I'd forgotten how to sing. James's face transformed, relief and joy, and something that looked like peace settling over his features. William closed his eyes, exhaled like he'd been holding his breath for 8 years. and I felt the last wall I'd built finally crumble into dust. That was 6 months ago. William moved into the house 3 blocks away, exactly when he said he would. Not into my house, despite James's hopeful suggestions. We were taking it slow, building trust brick by brick instead of expecting a foundation to appear overnight. But slow didn't mean distant. William was there for Saturday morning pancakes, Tuesday night homework sessions, every soccer practice and school event. He learned James's nighttime routine. 2 stories, water with no ice, nightlight on the left side of the room, door cracked exactly 4 inches. He learned mine too. Coffee black in the morning, the way I got quiet when I was overwhelmed, how I needed space to process before I could talk. The things the old William had been too distracted to notice. This William paid attention. I'd catch him watching me across the kitchen table while James chattered about his day, his eyes soft and patient, like he was memorizing the moment, like he understood that trust wasn't given. It was earned in 1,000 small moments that added up to something that felt dangerously close to forever. "Mom!" James burst through the front door one afternoon, his backpack flying. "Guess what?" "What, baby?" "I got picked for the advanced math class. Mrs. Patterson said my test scores were the highest in the grade." Pride swelled in my chest. "That's amazing, sweetheart. Can we tell Dad?" Before I could answer, my phone rang. William's name lit up the screen. James grabbed it. "Dad, guess what? I got into advanced math. Can you come over? Mom's making spaghetti." I listened to James's excited chatter, watched his face light up with every response, and felt something settle in my chest that had been unsettled for 8 years. My son had a father who showed up, actually showed up. William arrived 20 minutes later with flowers. Not expensive roses designed to impress. Daisies, my favorite. The kind I'd mentioned once, 8 years ago, in a conversation I'd assumed he'd forgotten. "For the chef," he said, handing them to me with a smile that made my stomach flip. "You remembered." "I remember everything, Danielle. I just finally know what to do with it." Dinner was chaotic. James talked nonstop about his math class, demonstrated a multiplication trick William had taught him, and spilled marinara sauce on his shirt twice. Normal, messy, perfect. After James went to bed, William stayed to help clean up. We worked in comfortable silence, passing dishes, navigating my small kitchen like we'd been doing this for years instead of months. "I have something to tell you," I said, rinsing a plate. William looked up, concern flickering across his face. "Okay. I enrolled in classes, online, to finish my degree." His expression transformed. "Danielle, that's incredible. I dropped out when I got pregnant. I always told myself I'd go back, but..." I shrugged. There was never time, never money, always some reason why it was impossible. And now? Now I have help. Now James has a father who can pick him up from school if I have a late class. Now I can actually imagine a future where I'm not just surviving. This is what partnership does. It doesn't erase your dreams. It makes space for them. It says your goals matter and I'll help you reach them, instead of expecting you to shrink yourself small enough to fit into the corners of someone else's ambition. William set down the dish he was holding and turned to face me fully. "I'm proud of you. And whatever you need, time, support, someone to watch James, I'm here." "I know," I said softly. "That's what makes it possible." The air between us shifted, charged with something that had been building for months, but neither of us had been brave enough to name. "Danielle, I know what you're going to say," I interrupted. "Do you?" I stepped closer, closing the distance we'd been carefully maintaining. "You're going to ask where we go from here, what this is, what we're doing." "And what are we doing?" His voice was low, careful, giving me space to define it. "We're building something," I said, slowly, carefully. "Something that feels real this time, not rushed, not built on promises we can't keep. Just present, together." William's hand came up to cup my face, his thumb brushing my cheekbone. "I can work with that." "Good, because William..." I took a breath. "I love you. I probably never stopped. But I need you to understand that I'm not the same person I was 8 years ago. I'm stronger, more guarded. I have boundaries now." "I know." And I love this version of you, the one who fought for herself and our son, the one who doesn't accept less than she deserves. He kissed me then, soft and slow and full of promise. And it felt like coming home to a place I'd forgotten existed. 3 weeks later, James's school held a family day. Parents were invited to spend the afternoon in the classroom, participating in activities, seeing their children's work. I arrived early, expecting to sit alone like I had every other year. But William was already there, sitting in a chair that was comically too small for him, looking completely out of place in his business casual among the other parents in jeans and hoodies. But he was there. James saw us both, and his face lit up like sunrise. "Mom! Dad! Come see my project!" We followed him to a bulletin board covered in family portraits. James's was in the center, three stick figures holding hands. One tall with eyes like his, one shorter with long hair, one small in the middle. Above it, in James's careful handwriting, my family. Not my mom, not the people I live with. My family. William's hand found mine, squeezed once, and I squeezed back. Later, driving home with James, singing off-key in the back seat, and William following in his car behind us, I caught my reflection in the rearview mirror and barely recognized myself. I looked happy, genuinely, completely happy. Like I'd finally stopped waiting for the other shoe to drop and started believing in the ground beneath my feet. That evening, the three of us walked to the park near William's house. James ran ahead to the swings while William and I sat on a bench, watching him play. "He's thriving," William observed. "He's more confident, more open." "He feels secure," I said. For the first time in his life, he's not wondering why he's different, why he doesn't have what other kids have. "And you?" William asked quietly. "Are you thriving?" I thought about it, really thought about it. 6 months ago, I'd been terrified of letting William back into our lives, terrified of losing control, terrified of being hurt again. Now, I was enrolled in school, my son was happy, and the man I'd once loved had proven, day after day, that people really could change. "Yeah," I said, "I think I am." William's arm came around my shoulders, and I let myself lean into him. Let myself trust the warmth and the steadiness and the promise of more tomorrows just like this one. James called from the swings, "Dad, push me!" William stood, squeezing my hand once before jogging over to our son. I watched them together, James's laughter carrying across the playground, William's patient hands steadying the swing. The easy affection between father and son that looked like it had always been there instead of built from scratch in 6 months. If you made it to the end of this story, thank you. Thank you for witnessing this journey, for believing in second chances, for understanding that healing isn't linear and love doesn't always look like we expect. Subscribe if you want more stories like this. Comment if this story touched you. Share if someone you know needs to hear that it's never too late to rebuild. And I thought about the irony of it all. The day James got lost was the worst day of my life. 47 minutes of pure terror that I'd carry forever. But it was also the day that brought us here, to this park, to this family, to this second chance I'd been too afraid to hope for. Losing my child, even briefly, is what saved our family, because it brought William back. Not the ambitious boy who'd chosen everything over me, but the man who'd learned what actually mattered, who showed up, who stayed, who chose us every single day in 1,000 small ways that added up to everything. James jumped off the swing and ran toward me, William close behind, and I opened my arms to catch them both. My family, imperfect, complicated, built from broken pieces and second chances, and the stubborn belief that love, real love, was worth the risk. Not the fairy tale version, the real one, the one that shows up, that stays, that chooses you even when it's hard. Next week, William's moving into our house. Not his house 3 blocks away, ours. James asked if he could help pack. Asked if William's old dinosaur collection could go in his room. Asked if this meant we were a real family now. We told him we already were. And as the sun set over the playground and James insisted on one more turn, and William caught my eye with a smile that promised tomorrow and all the tomorrows after that, I finally let myself believe in the impossible. We were going to be okay. all three of us, together. The end. To the women watching this, your story doesn't end where you think it does. The chapter that felt like an ending might just be an unexpected beginning. The person you walked away from might not be the person who shows up years later. And the fear that keeps you safe might be the same fear keeping you from the life you deserve. This story is for you, for the mothers carrying everything alone, for the women who made impossible choices and wonder if they were right, for anyone who's ever been afraid to hope because hope felt too dangerous. You are not alone. Your story matters. And sometimes, not always, but sometimes people really do change. Thank you for letting me tell Danielle's story. Until the next one,